Hey guys, and welcome back to a brand new video. Now today's video is actually a subscriber suggestion by Panexi00. About a week ago they commented, "Hello, can you make a tutorial on how to edit like Jordi.coalitic?" I think that's how you say the name, probably wrong. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So if you have a suggestion of what you want us to film a video on, could be anything, even like not how to edit like videos, you know, just let me know down below in the comments and I will see if I can film a video and I'll mention you in the video as well. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So this is the photo that we're going to be editing in the style of. Now if you don't know this guy already, go ahead and check out his Instagram account. It's absolutely amazing. He's absolutely blown up recently. He's doing super well, and he's got a very unique style of taking photographs. So for example, this one here, he shows you like behind the scenes of how he took the photos as well. Like really look like action shots, but in reality when you see how he's done it, he's got someone to throw the ball up to where he wants the ball to be taken, and then you get someone standing in the background almost looking like they've just kicked it. Similar, I imagine, for this one. Yeah, so they'll hold it. Yeah, get someone else to throw it up. So cool things like this. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is we're going to be editing in the style of this guy. Now the trouble is with this guy is he doesn't have the editing style isn't very similar for all of his photos. The thing that is similar is how he takes the photos, and also he's got a lot of contrast in his photos. So that's kind of what we're going to be basing it towards. So if you want to edit like this guy, make sure you take photos in a very similar style. So this one, for example, just to show you behind the scenes, you know, this is how he takes his photos, blah blah, and then you get this really stunning look here. Now this photo has like a little bit of fade and stuff in, high contrast, quite desaturated, but the photo that we're going to be mimicking today is one that's in this carousel here. Let me find it, scroll all the way through, right at the end. This one and this one here, mainly this one. Now this was very simply taken by him getting a model holding like a colander or a strainer or something above her face, getting the cool lighting effect and then taking a photo. Very simple, but that's what we're going to be editing today. So this is the photo that we are going to be editing, and then let's open it up in Lightroom. This is the photo that we're going to be editing in Lightroom to mimic it. So you can see, let me just flick between the two, very similar color grade at the moment. We'll be doing a few more things as we go through to get the hair slightly closer, desaturate that as well, but that's what we're going to be editing today. So first things first, before we go and start the video, guys, do go ahead and check me out on Instagram. It's Matthew_GKB. Cool to connect with you guys over there. Send me any DMs, any suggestions for videos as well. And if you want me to check out your Instagram page, I will do as well. And of course, check out Sebastian as well. Sebastian_JWB. He's got some really cool photos as well. Okay, cool. So let's just dive straight into this video, shall we? So let's go back onto this photo here that we're mimicking. So first things first is we've got a lot of contrast, clarity, high sharpness in this photo. Looks like we don't have any fade, like I mentioned in the other photo. Very desaturated. The background, as you saw here, was yellow, and he's desaturated that to be very dark grey. So that's one thing we know. The skin tone is quite orange, with flecks of red, and very saturated there. Looks like he's taken the tone curve and taken up those midtones to get these really saturated midtones here. What else? That's pretty much it. High clarity, high contrast, and desaturated tones apart from the skin tone. And he's also made the lips a little bit more orange, less red. So that's what we're going to be kind of pushing towards in our photo. Okay, so let's just dive in here. So if you want to go ahead and get the presets for all of these edits that I've done on my channel, you can go ahead and download a free trial. The link is down below in the description. Go ahead and get some of them for free. And then you can go ahead and get a bunch sent to you every single month as well if you want to go ahead and check that down below. Link in the description. Okay, so this is going to be the edit that we're doing. So let me just reset this and take this back to basics. Now the first thing is we are going to want to kind of adjust the size, the zoom, the crop of this photo, because the initial photo here is very zoomed out, and the one we're mimicking is much more focused on the face. So that's what we're going to be doing, and because we're focusing on Instagram, I'm going to be cropping it to a 4:5 ratio. That's just because that's roughly what you do when you're on Instagram. Let's not rotate that, let's just leave that. Oh, escape. Let's do that again. Okay, 4:5, crop in, nice, on the face. Now I want to make sure we get a lot of the face in, but I also want these cool white striped lines going across her face as well, because that is what makes most of this photo. So that's probably okay. Let's just click done and zoom right in on the face there. So you know, if this was me taking a photo, I would actually edit the full zoomed out version, but obviously because we are focusing on this guy's style, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be making sure we do a very similar thing. So the first things first is I want to make sure we take our temperature down to the left. That's the first thing, is because his photo is very blue, cold look to the photo, and ours is very, you know, warm, summery yellow. Also, our highlights, you can see here, are very bright. The whole image is a little bit too bright, so we've got to take that down, take the highlights down, maybe lift up the shadows a little bit for when I add in the contrast later on. And then we're going to start desaturating things and adding in some sharpness, maybe a little bit of grain as well, that might look quite cool, and then adjusting our tone curve. So first things first is for our temperature sliders, let's just bring that down a little bit to, probably I'm thinking around quite low. You know, let's go for around 4,300. Okay, I think that looks right. Now the only thing is this looks a little bit pink, so I am going to actually bring that down, because yeah, that's better. Take the tint more towards the green, just take that little bit of pink magenta out of the photo. Next thing is I want to take the exposure of the entire photo down, because as I said, it is a little bit too bright, so we want to just drop the exposure a little bit. That also helps bring in the detail back into the highlights. And now this is where I say I might want to bring up the shadows, because we've kind of crushed the shadows here and we've lost a lot of detail. So we're going to leave our contrast at the time being as standard, because what we'll do is we'll adjust the contrast more like accurately, I guess, within the tone curve. So we'll just leave the contrast slider as it is, because I'm not a huge fan of touching the contrast slider, because it's just very generic across the entire image. Highlights, you know, let's leave those as standard and then lift up our shadows, because we want that detail in there. Whack those straight up to 100, and immediately you can see we bring out a lot more detail into the shadows. Whites, I think we can also try and sharpen up those highlights there, maybe make them really bright white, because that's what we are looking at here. These are very bright highlights, especially on the side of the hair here. Very harsh lighting where there is lighting, so we want to make sure we're mimicking that as well. So let's just leave that like that. Blacks, I'm going to drop those, because we do want that contrast, so we can control that by bringing down the blacks as well. Okay, so clarity, I'm just going to bring this right up. Now, usually I wouldn't suggest to bring your clarity up to about the +60s, because when you add in clarity to photos, it's, you know, a bit touch and go. You can either get a really cool effect, or it just looks like you've edited and pushed the photo too far. But for this case, I think clarity is really going to help for us to get that high contrast look, and really make sure we get the sharp lighting, because the photo that we are editing has much more soft lighting, and the photo that we are mimicking has much more harsh lighting. So the way that you can push your photos from one way or the other is by adjusting the clarity slider. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Next up is the vibrancy and saturation. Now I'm just going to bring up the vibrancy and then drop the saturation, because that is my preferred way of editing. Now the photo is actually quite desaturated. Now at the moment the skin tone looks a little bit off, looks a little bit too desaturated, but we're going to adjust that when we come down to the tone curve and the saturation sliders in a second. Cool, so next thing is I like to, on my tone curve, put my 3-point curve. If you've watched one of my videos before, you'll know that this is like the base starting position that I always do when I come to adjusting my tone curve. Now what I like to do here is I'm actually going to bring up our midtones a little bit, just to bring in a little bit more saturation there, and also what I'm going to do is push those a little bit brighter and to make that a little bit more contrasty. I'm just going to make sure that that's on the line there. Then I'm going to drop my shadows and bring those down quite a bit as well. So we don't want it to be too much. Let's just bring those midtones down a little bit, and that is not too bad. Now that's looking very, very contrasty at the moment, but hopefully we can come back and do some minor tweaks in a second. Cool, so next up is the Hsl sliders. Now this is going to be the fun bit, because already we're actually getting that nice desaturated look to the photo, and let's just do a comparison. You know, we can really pushing towards this. We're getting that nice contrasty look, and we're really getting those bright highlights. So let's just do a quick before and after. Before and after. You can see how different the image is. You see how soft it was, and now how contrasty and crisp the image is. Next up, for the reds, as I said at the beginning, we want the lips to be less red or pink and be more orange. And you can achieve that really easily just by bringing up your red slider to the right, and it takes out the red and pushes it more towards the orangey green side. Obviously not to plus 100 because that will just look a little bit weird, but plus 35, plus 38, that'll be right. Okay, with the orange slider I'm actually going to decrease that a little bit. That's just to take out the green look to the skin. It looks a little bit too green. If we push that down to the left, it just adds in a little bit more red and makes the skin tone a little bit more natural. Yellows, let's have a look. Yeah, let's bring those down as well. I don't like it when I have too much green in my photos. Don't know why, personal preference, but as well, in the photo we're copying, there isn't actually any green there. And as well, the yellow background that I showed you, he's desaturated completely, so we'll be doing that as well. Okay, green slider, don't know if there's anything actually in there, so let's just leave the green slider alone because there's no green actually in our image. Aquas and blues, this is going to adjust the look of the eye and maybe a little bit of the shadows as well. Now, you've got to be careful with these because if you push these too far either way, so that's not making any difference, you can get a really obvious teal look to your photos, which I don't necessarily want. And I don't want the eyes to look teal, and I don't want them to look too grey either, but let's push them up to the right because we're trying to mimic this photo here. I'm going for this eye. There was another one actually, you can see it a little bit clearer, very grey eye here. Now she has two different coloured eyes, which is really, really interesting, but we're mimicking this one, which is quite a grey eye, so I think that's what we'll be going for here. Okay, so that's quite cool. We'll just leave the purples and the magentas as standard, they don't really affect the image. Saturation, that's the next one. Let's just whack up our saturation of our reds, bring that up quite high. Then what I'm going to do, oranges, bring that up, just to bring in the colour back to the skin. Take our yellow saturation right the way off, we don't want that. Greens as well, and then aquas, blues. What I'm doing here is I'm just taking the saturation down of everything that's not essentially the skin tone, because the entire image is very grey, the one we're trying to copy, and if we have those colours there, it's really going to take away from that desaturated grey black kind of look. Okay, luminance for the red I'm actually going to bring up. Now that's just going to help us make the lips and the skin pop and make it a little bit more contrasty, and the same for the orange. Now I'm just adjusting, the reason why I'm adjusting the red and the orange so much is because that controls the lips and the skin tone, and a little bit in the hair as well actually for the orange, and actually the shirt, because those are the two main colours. Orange really is the fundamental colour of this entire image. Interestingly, skin tone has a lot of orange in it, so those two are the ones where really most of the adjustments are going to come into play. Let's leave the other ones. Let's bring up the luminance of the eyes a little bit as well, just to make sure we get this high clarity look in the pupil. Cool, next up is going to be the split toning. Now the split toning is really going to make a difference to this photo, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add in some blue to the shadows to counteract that yellow that I've pushed in, but I'm also going to apply yellow to the highlights. If you've watched my videos before, you'll see that's what I usually like doing, and that's what is kind of the most common thing really to do, because your shadows usually are colder and more towards the blue side, and your highlights are usually warmer, more towards like the sun kind of side of things. So look at that already, adding in that blue has really helped just to cool down the image. Now I reckon we could actually just get away with not actually adding anything into the highlights, but I am going to see what it looks like. If we hold down Alt, it'll actually show me the colour that I'm applying, but we just kind of looking for like a nice orangey yellow, like think sun, like sunlight, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, yeah, no, that's really looking closer to the image now. So you can see, that's not the one we're basing off, that's the one there. So we're really getting closer there. Now actually, while I'm looking at this, it does look like he's got a little bit of fade in the image, so we'll come back actually and just add in a tiny bit of fade just to soften the image across a little bit. Not too much, it's very, very subtle, but I think there is a little bit there. Okay, so let's just leave that. Sharpening, let's just add in a bunch of sharpening just to really crisp up that image. Noise reduction, leave, come down to our effect slider. Now effect slider is going to be really interesting, because what we're going to do, we don't do this a lot, is we're going to add in some dehaze to the image. This is just going to really make it kind of crisp and more contrasty. So not too much, because if we bring in too much, you know, it makes it go a little bit crazy. But +7, +8, that would be nice. There we go. We're actually going to add in a tiny bit of grain as well, and then we're going to take our highlight priority and just essentially just give ourselves a bit of a vignette, but not too much, maybe down to about -15. Will be quite nice. There we go. Cool, cool, cool. Next up is the camera calibration. So we're pretty much almost there, but the camera calibration is always fun, just to kind of push the sliders around a bit, see if you can really just get those colours a little bit closer to what we're trying to copy. So we see already we're getting there with the entire image. If anything, we want the hair to be a little bit more desaturated, but we'll do that with a brush tool in a second. So let's try and bring up the red primary, and we'll bring down the blue primary. So this is generally the method that you use if you want to get like an orange and teal look to the photo. Up there, down just a bit, and then see what this does. Let's just take that to -3. Saturation, I think, is fine. Okay, there we go. That is pretty much the entire photo done. Let's just compare it. You know, if anything, I would say we've added a touch too much contrast, but we can always adjust that by bringing up our blacks here, bring in a little bit more detail. Cool. Next up, we're just going to take our brush, and I'm actually going to just set this all back to standard and just take our saturation, drop that off a little bit, increase the brush size, and just brush over the hair.